Hi, my name is Alexander Gonzalez,
I'm Julian Leonard.
and today we're going to be presenting our project for the cargo alternative ending. So, starting off with the gap analysis. The climax of this film, or of the ending of this film, is the final battle with Vic, the turning of Andy, and Toomey bringing Rosie to her tribe so that they can both be taken care of. Some of the shortcomings in this film include the fight between Vic and Andy, and Toomey's involvement in this fight, Vic's hesitation in choosing not to kill or to kill Rosie, and Andy's death. Vic shows a glimpse of a change in his morals when he gives up Rosie instead of killing her. This change in his moral compass should have been more explored. This would have alleviated the issue of him being the most two-dimensional main character in the film. Moving on. The first thing we would modify would be Vic's indecision. We would make it so that Vic is actually held hostage and is convinced to help them accomplish their goal instead of just sitting there and doing nothing and not offering anything to the story. This would occur by Andy speaking with Vic instead of just trying to shoot him and, resorting to his gun and violence. This may have given Vic enough reason to have a change of heart and to help Toomey and Rosie actually survive. These shortcomings were evident in his indecision, in Toomey's lack of action, and in Andy's choice to just try to fight Vic and resorting to violence. The observable behaviors here were actually Vic's psychosis, Andy's violence, and Toomey's shock. These were all very clear in the final scene, and I will pass it on to Soichi.
For the ideal scenario, we would have Andy beginning to turn in the tunnel scene instead of the desert. And then Andy would sneak up on Vic and hold him at gunpoint so that he can try to convince him to take care of Rosie and Toomey because he realized that those are his last moments alive. Vic would be initially hostile, but eventually would hold himself accountable for his previous atrocities and would have a change of heart and decide to help Rosie and Toomey. And at the end, Andy would turn and Vic would have to kill him, replacing him as Rosie's caretaker. Moving on to the progress flowchart.
So, through this flowchart, we're going to go through each scene as we go through it. And this alternate scenario begins at the tunnel because this is really the climax of the film. And the main catalyst here during the scene is Andy now choosing to hold Vic at gunpoint and actually have a conversation with him rather than resorting to violence. And he does this because he should recognize at this point that he is not going to be alive long enough to take Toomey and Rosie to the tribe. So the next part of the scene is Vic's decision to actually help Rosie and Toomey, and I think this occurs. The way that we do this is by making Andy appeal to Vic's moral compass, more so in the sense of using Rosie, because this hasn't really been used before in the film, to appeal to Vic's humanity. The next big moment is Vic's decision to kill Andy. This happens because obviously Vic still feels the need for vengeance, but since we have this happen after Andy turns into a zombie, it's also more of an act of mercy. So then the last two parts are Vic taking the girls to safety, which is more sort of the epilogue, where now Vic upholds Andy's dying wish, and them safely reaching the village, with Vic having achieved more of a character development in this film, and no longer being such a two-dimensional character. So now we'll be able to get into the actual script of this new scenario.
So we pass it on to Soichi to read the prelude.
So I'm going to be the narrator. Alex is going to be Andy, and Julian is going to be Vic. So Andy, Toomey, and Rosie are going through the tunnel and see Vic entering the tunnel on the other side. And Andy decides to sneak up on Vic as best he can and hopes to avoid a fight. Andy does this with the intention of appealing to Vic's better nature so that Vic can take the girls to the tribe. Andy knows he will not make it to the tribe before he turns. Andy presses the end of the pistol against Vic's spine and pulls back the hammer.
Don't move or I'll shoot. I just want to talk.
Vic stays stiff and grinds his teeth in Andy.
Why should I listen to anything you have to say?
Andy whacks Vic in the back of the head with the butt of the revolver, and Vic falls to the floor.
Listen, mate, I'm out of time. I need your help.
Andy flashes his watch. It's blinking red. He's on the verge of turning, and Vic's eyes widen.
Why the fuck should I help you? You took one of mine, I should take one of yours.
Lorraine was never yours from the start.
Andy points at Rosie.
Look at her. Look at the innocence in her eyes. She's the picture of hope. She's the future. She could be your forgiveness.
Vic looks at her, but still feels rebellious and furious at Andy's demands. Vic spits at Andy's face.
Fuck you.
Listen, mate, we've all made mistakes. There's nothing you can do about it now. The only thing you can do is be a better person for the future. You and you alone can give Rosie and Toomey a fighting chance at survival. If you have any shred of humanity left, please help them.
Vic winces as he has flashbacks to all the atrocities he's committed. He thinks of the time he left his co-workers for dead and shoots Lorraine, and traps Toomey in the cage's bait. He takes one more look at Rosie and Toomey, and his countenance relaxes. He suddenly realizes what he must do.
Alright, fine. I'll help you.
Thank you. I need you to take her and keep her safe until you get to the mountains. There's a group of people in those mountains that'll keep Rosie and Toomey safe. I just need you to get them there for me. I won't be able to make it.
Vic nods in agreement. Andy gives Toomey the gun, helps Vic up, and points Vic to the mountains.
Go, now hurry.
Andy gets purulent drainage covering his eyes, and he wipes it off.
You have to leave. Hurry before I turn.
Andy turns to Rosie and kisses her.
I love you.
Andy turns to Toomey.
Thank you, Mita.
Andy collapses and starts convulsing on the ground. Toomey winces and covers Rosie's eyes. Andy gets up and charges at Vic, and Vic puts Andy down by hitting him in the head with a wrench. Vic, Toomey, and Rosie then begin trekking up the mountain in search of Toomey's people. They eventually find a hunting party and are taken back to the main. Rosie is then accepted as one of the tribespeople, and Toomey is welcomed back. Vic tries to leave, but the tribespeople give him a chance to explain himself. He is eventually forgiven and welcomed into the group.
Alright, and that's the script. We will be transitioning now into the ethical analysis. I pass it on to Soichi.
So, for the first bullet point, previously Vic had excused his behavior as being just a product of his own circumstances. For example, he excused his using Toomey as bait and looting the zombies' corpses as just taking advantage while the sun shines. Now, with his newfound moral compass, he realizes that he should hold himself truly and completely responsible for his mistakes. Even within the context of his desperate circumstances, due to the fact that he had the freedom to choose to do more morally virtuous things, he realizes that it is unethical to behave in the way that he did.
Alright, and in the second bullet point, Vic kills Andy after he turns, and this is done in hope to put Andy out of his misery. During this entire film, Vic has actually tried to kill Andy out of revenge for what happened with his abducted wife Lorraine. And this mercy killing shows more of a change of heart and a change of ethics within Vic, that he chose to kill Andy out of mercy instead of revenge.
So the ethics of children is very different than the ethics when compared to adults, especially in infants. And it's not uncommon for people to argue, to make the argument to put children's lives ahead of adults. And this is mostly because of what they represent for humanity. They represent future and they represent innocence. And this is like a stark contrast to the apocalypse, the feeling of impending doom and death that the apocalypse brings. Children directly oppose this this idea, and that's why Andy uses this influence over Vic and appeals to that emotion. Vic is certainly not a good person, but we saw in the actual cut of the film, as we mentioned earlier, that he was too hesitant to actually harm Rosie. So in this ideal ending, we explore that more and use that as the primary reason for Vic's change of heart. And in the actual cut, since he didn't get that chance to uphold his sense of ethics, this ideal ending allowed him to uphold that sense of morality that he and every human has in regards to children. And that is the end of our presentation.
Thank you very much.